My name is Willow, and I'm 29 years old. For 12 years, I was the silent, indispensable partner in my husband's skyrocketing career. I was the ghostwriter of his brilliant speeches, the strategist behind his major deals, and the supportive wife who managed our home so he could conquer the world. When he was offered the CEO position at a major tech firm in London, I was ecstatic for us. But on the night of his celebratory dinner, sitting at a table with our closest friends, he made an announcement of his own. He wasn't just taking the job in London, he was taking his beautiful new assistant, Chloe, with him. He told me, in front of everyone, that our marriage was over and that my contribution was no longer needed. What he didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that my contribution wasn't just a supportive role. For years, I had been the architect of his success, carefully documenting every idea I gave him, every strategy I developed, every connection I forged on his behalf. He thought he was discarding his quiet, unassuming wife. He was about to find out he had just discarded the very foundation of his empire. And I was about to collect on 12 years of intellectual property theft. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. Before I tell you how I turned my deepest betrayal into the most satisfying revenge, hit like and subscribe for more stories about underestimated women who finally claim their power. Before my world imploded, my life looked like a modern fairy tale. I was married to Julian, a charismatic and ambitious man who was the darling of the Boston financial tech scene. We met in the final year of university, where I was the quiet, top-of-my-class economics major, and he was the charming business student with big dreams and a flair for presentation. We fell in love fast and hard. He was drawn to my analytical mind, and I was drawn to his boundless energy. We were a perfect team, or so I thought. After graduation, we married and made a pact. Julian would be the face of our ambition. He was the natural salesman, the networker, the one who could command a room. I, on the other hand, was the strategist. I was happiest behind the scenes, analyzing market trends, developing financial models, and crafting the intricate business plans that would become the blueprint for his career. I had crippling stage fright and a deep aversion to corporate politics, so the arrangement seemed perfect. I would be the architect, and he would be the builder. For 12 years, I poured every ounce of my intellect and creativity into Julian's career. I chose to be a consultant, working from home, which gave me the flexibility to dedicate my best hours to our shared goals. When he was a junior analyst, I wrote the research papers that got him noticed. When he was promoted to head of department, I developed the innovative risk assessment protocol that saved his firm millions during a market downturn. When he was headhunted by a rival company, I was the one who coached him through every stage of the negotiation, crafting his talking points and anticipating their every move. Our friends and family saw only the results, Julian's meteoric rise. They saw the beautiful brownstone we bought in Beacon Hill, the European vacations, the charity galas where Julian was always the center of attention. They saw me as the supportive, lucky wife, standing proudly in his shadow. They had no idea I was the one casting it. Our role was our secret, a private game we played. At night, over a bottle of wine, we would dissect the day's challenges. He would bring me the problems, and I would give him the solutions. It was an intellectual dance that felt, for a long time, like the ultimate form of intimacy. He was always effusive in his private praise. "You're my secret weapon, Willow," he would say, kissing my forehead. "I couldn't do any of this without you." I believed him. The first crack in our perfect facade appeared 6 months ago, with the arrival of Chloe.
She was his new executive assistant, a 24-year-old with a business degree from Stanford, razor-sharp ambition, and a wardrobe that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Julian started staying later at the office. The late-night strategy sessions became less frequent. "Chloe is a lifesaver," he would say when I asked. "She's so on top of things. It's freeing me up to focus on the big picture." The big picture, I soon realized, was a CEO position at a competing firm based in London. It was the culmination of everything we had worked for. And true to form, I was the one who orchestrated the final push. I spent 2 months analyzing the company's weaknesses, crafting a groundbreaking 5-year growth strategy, and preparing a presentation that was virtually guaranteed to land him the job. The night before his final interview, I sat with him for hours, drilling him on every possible question, making sure my ideas sounded like his own. When Julian called me from the London office to tell me he got the job, his voice was electric with triumph. "We did it, Willow! Can you believe it? CEO!" he said, the "we" sounding more like a reflex than a genuine acknowledgement. "I'm flying back tonight. I have booked a table at Ostrich to celebrate with our friends. Get ready to pop the champagne." The celebratory dinner was an intimate affair. Just us and our 2 closest couple friends, Ben and Olivia, and Marcus and Fiona. They were the inner circle, the ones who had witnessed Julian's entire ascent. The restaurant buzzed with the quiet energy of Boston's elite. We were seated at a prime table, and Julian was in his element, regaling our friends with the story of his final interview. He retold the key points of the 5-year plan, my plan, with such conviction that even I almost believed the ideas had originated with him. "To Julian," Ben toasted, raising his glass. "The boy wonder becomes the king. We're so proud of you, man." They all drank, their faces glowing with admiration for my husband. I felt a surge of pride. The familiar, quiet satisfaction of the ghostwriter watching their work performed on a grand stage. "And of course, I couldn't have done it without my amazing wife," said Julian, turning to me and squeezing my hand. 12 years of putting up with my crazy hours. She's the rock that makes this all possible." Our friends murmured in agreement, their smiles tinged with a familiar, patronizing warmth. Good old Willow, so supportive, so patient. It was the role I had chosen, the praise I had accepted. After the main course, Julian tapped his glass with a fork, a gesture that always meant he had a prepared speech. "So, as you all know, this new job means a move to London. It's a huge step, and it's going to mean a lot of changes." He paused for dramatic effect. His eyes swept the table before landing on me. My heart swelled. I thought this was it, the moment he would finally give me the public credit I secretly craved. "It's not a transition I can make alone," he continued, his voice taking on a serious, almost somber tone. "It requires a partner who is fully aligned with the demands of this new life, someone who understands the international market, who can navigate that corporate world seamlessly." He squeezed my hand again, but this time it felt different. Not affectionate, but possessive. Which is why this move also marks a new chapter in my personal life. Willow and I are separating. The silence that fell over the table was so abrupt, it was like a physical blow. Ben's fork clattered against his plate. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. I just stared at Julian, my mind refusing to process the words. Separating?
"Julian, what are you talking about?" I whispered, the sound getting lost in the sudden roaring in my ears. He didn't look at me. He was still addressing the table, our friends, his audience. "I've been fortunate enough to find a partner who shares my vision for the future. Chloe, my executive assistant, will be joining me in London. We've been seeing each other for the past 4 months." He said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, as if he were announcing a new stock acquisition. Chloe, the 24-year-old assistant. I felt the blood drain from my face. Our friends stared. their faces a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. They looked from Julian to me and back again, as if watching a car crash in slow motion. Willow has been a wonderful partner for the early stage of my career, said Julian, his voice laced with a nauseating magnanimity. I will always be grateful for her support. But our paths have diverged. I'm on a rocket ship, and she's content on the ground. It's no one's fault. It's just how it is. He finally turned to me, his eyes cold and devoid of the love I had built my life around. I'll be generous, of course. You can have the house. I'll provide a very comfortable alimony. You'll be well taken care of. You won't have to worry about a thing. And that was it. 12 years of marriage, of partnership, of shared dreams, dismissed in a 2-minute speech in front of our closest friends. I wasn't his partner. I was a stage of his career. I wasn't the architect of his success. I was the ground he had to leave behind to reach the stars. He wasn't just leaving me. He was erasing me. The shock was so profound, it left no room for tears. All I felt was a strange, glacial calm. He thought I was the ground. He had no idea I was the one who had built the rocket ship. I don't remember much about the rest of the dinner. I think I nodded, maybe even mumbled something about needing to use the restroom. I remember the look in Olivia's eyes, a mixture of horror and pity. I remember Ben refusing to meet my gaze. I remember walking out of the restaurant and into the cold Boston night, the sound of their muted conversation fading behind me. Julian didn't come home that night. Of course he didn't. He was with Chloe, celebrating their new life, the one they had built on the wreckage of mine. I spent the night in a state of suspended animation, sitting on our living room sofa, the one I had picked out, in the house I had designed, and I began to plan. The grief was there, a vast, dark ocean threatening to pull me under. But beneath the grief, something else was stirring, a cold, methodical anger. The anger of a creator whose work had been stolen and credited to someone else. He had said I was content on the ground. He had made the fatal mistake of confusing my quiet nature with a lack of ambition. He had mistaken my support for dependence. For 12 years, I had kept meticulous records. It was part of my nature as a strategist. Every business plan, every market analysis, every speech I had written for him was saved on a password-protected external hard drive. I had archived emails where I had sent him suggestions that became his landmark policies. I'd even kept the cocktail napkins from our late-night brainstorming sessions, where I had sketched out the very ideas he was now using to launch his new life. I had never saved these things for a day like this. I had saved them because I am an archivist by nature. But now they were my arsenal. The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to a woman named Evelyn Reed, a notoriously tough divorce lawyer known as the Shark. I had met her at a fundraiser a year ago and had been impressed with her sharp intellect and no-nonsense demeanor. He announced it at a dinner party? In front of your friends? She asked, a note of grim appreciation in her voice. Oh, this is going to be fun. The second call was to a man named Arthur Vance, the lead board member of the London firm that had just hired Julian. Mr. Vance was a legendary figure in the industry, an old-school titan who valued integrity and intellectual honesty above all else. He was the one who had been most impressed by the visionary 5-year plan Julian had presented. I had researched him extensively, and I knew one thing: he did not suffer fools, and he despised intellectual theft. Mr. Vance, my name is Willow Croft. I believe my husband Julian just accepted your offer to become CEO, I said when his assistant put me through.
There has been a significant development I believe you should be aware of regarding the intellectual property he presented. I have some documents I think you'll find very illuminating. I can be in your London office in 2 days. The plan was simple. Julian thought he was negotiating a generous divorce settlement with his quiet, heartbroken wife. He had no idea he was about to face a corporate intellectual property dispute that would threaten not just his new job, but his entire career. He had taken my past. I was about to take his future. The first step was to play the part he had cast for me. When Julian finally came home 2 days later to discuss the details, he found me exactly as he expected, pale, tear-streaked, and surrounded by wedding photo albums. "I know this is hard," he said, his voice dripping with condescending pity, "but it's for the best. We've grown apart." "I just don't understand, Julian. I thought we were a team," I whispered, letting my voice crack. "We were, for a time," he said, sitting down opposite me, adopting the tone of a patient therapist. "But I need something different now. Chloe, she challenges me. She's in my world." He slid a piece of paper across the coffee table. It was a preliminary divorce settlement, and as he had promised, it was generous. He was offering me the house free and clear, and alimony that would allow me to live comfortably for the rest of my life without ever working again. He was trying to buy my silence. He was trying to pay me for the rights to my life's work. "This is very generous," I said, my voice trembling as I looked at the paper. "I want to make sure you're taken care of," he said, a magnanimous smile on his face. He thought he was winning. He thought this would be easy. I looked up at him, my eyes wide with manufactured naivety. "There's just one thing, Julian. That 5-year plan you presented to the board in London, I was so proud of you. I'd love a copy, just for a scrapbook, a memory of the last thing we built together." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something, annoyance, suspicion, in his eyes, but it passed quickly, replaced by his usual confident charm. "Of course," he said. "I'll have Chloe email it to you." He had no idea he was about to email me the very evidence I would use to destroy him. While Julian was busy disentangling himself from our marriage with what he thought was graceful efficiency, I was executing a multi-front attack. Evelyn Reed, my lawyer, immediately filed for divorce, but with a crucial and unexpected petition. We weren't just asking for alimony and the house. We were filing a claim for a 50% ownership stake in all future earnings derived from intellectual property co-developed during the marriage. It was a novel legal argument, and it sent a shockwave through his legal team. "What is this?" his lawyer had apparently barked over the phone at Evelyn. "It's a simple claim of intellectual partnership," Evelyn had replied coolly. Mrs. Croft was the primary strategist behind Mr. Croft's major career successes. We have the documentation to prove it. We consider his career to be a marital asset. While they were scrambling to respond to that legal bomb, I was on a plane to London. I walked into the imposing glass and steel headquarters of the tech firm, my external hard drive in my briefcase. I had requested a meeting with Arthur Vance under the guise of being a concerned shareholder. I owned a few token shares of their company, a detail I had made sure of months ago. Mr. Vance was an imposing man in his late 60s, with a reputation for being able to spot a lie from 100 paces. I sat in his cavernous office with its panoramic views of the London skyline, and I laid out my story. I didn't cry, I didn't get emotional. I presented it as a business case. For the past 12 years, my husband and I operated as a strategic partnership. I was the back-end developer of his career, and he was the front-end interface.
I explained using tech jargon I knew he would appreciate. The 5-year growth plan he presented to this board was not his intellectual property. It was mine, and I have the time-stamped files, email records, and original drafts to prove it. I handed him a meticulously organized binder. It contained a side-by-side comparison, my original document, dated 6 months prior, and the official presentation he had received from Julian, which Chloe had so helpfully emailed me. The content was nearly identical. I also included annotated examples of his past successes, cross-referenced with my own archived work. The risk assessment protocol, the M&A strategy for a major acquisition, it was all there, my intellectual DNA stamped on every page. Mr. Vance was silent for a long time, his sharp eyes scanning the documents. I could see his expression shifting from skepticism to curiosity to a cold, hard anger. He was a man who had built his empire on innovation and integrity. He was looking at evidence of a massive fraud that had been perpetrated against him and his board. He told us this was all his own work, Mr. Vance said, finally, his voice a low growl. He looked me in the eye and swore on his reputation. His reputation, Mr. Vance, was a marital asset that I helped create, I replied. And now he is attempting to liquidate that asset for his own personal gain, while leaving the primary developer, me, with nothing. This isn't just a marital dispute. It's a case of intellectual property theft that puts your company at significant risk. What happens when you need the next 5-year plan, and the mind that created the first one is no longer in the building? I left the binder with him and flew home that same day. I had planted the seed. Now I just had to wait for it to grow. The fallout was swift and spectacular. 2 days later, Julian called me, his voice a mixture of fury and panic. "What did you do? I just got a call from Arthur Vance. The board is calling an emergency meeting. They're talking about a formal review of my hiring process." I simply corrected the record regarding authorship of the strategic plan, I said calmly, savoring the terror in his voice. You went behind my back to my new employer to try and sabotage me? You announced the end of our marriage at a dinner party, Julian. I think we're past the point of worrying about going behind each other's backs. He was unraveling. He had been so certain of his power, so confident in his narrative of the brilliant husband leaving behind his simple, supportive wife. He had never imagined that the simple, supportive wife would have a briefcase full of evidence and a direct line to the chairman of the board. Meanwhile, our friends who had been caught in the crossfire at that disastrous dinner party were beginning to choose sides. Olivia called me first. "I am so sorry, Willow. I had no idea. He made it sound like you were just a homemaker," she whispered, her voice thick with shame. "Ben is furious with him. To do that to you after everything?" The story of my secret weapon status began to circulate through our social circle. The narrative was shifting. Julian was no longer the brilliant man making a tough but necessary life change. He was starting to look like a fraud. The emergency board meeting in London took place a week later. Julian was summoned to present his case. According to the snippets of information I got from a sympathetic source inside the company, it was a bloodbath. Arthur Vance, armed with my binder of evidence, systematically dismantled Julian's claims. He asked him pointed questions about the strategic plan, questions about market nuances and financial modeling that he couldn't answer without my notes. He stumbled, he blustered, he tried to claim it was a collaborative effort, but the evidence of my sole authorship was overwhelming. The final blow came when Mr. Vance presented the board with the legal filing from Evelyn Reed, the one claiming half of his future earnings as a product of my intellectual property. The board wasn't just looking at a man who had lied during his interview. They were looking at a man who was about to be embroiled in a messy, high-profile legal battle that would call his entire professional history into question. The risk was too great. That afternoon, the firm released a terse public statement. Due to unforeseen circumstances that have recently come to light, Julian Croft's appointment as CEO has been rescinded effective immediately. He was fired before he had even officially started. The rocket ship he had been so proud of had just exploded on the launch pad. He came back to Boston a broken man. The triumphant CEO in waiting was gone, replaced by a man whose reputation was in tatters. The news of his firing spread through the financial community like wildfire. He was toxic. No one would touch him. He arrived at the brownstone, the one I supposedly had, to find that I had changed the locks. He stood on the porch, ringing the bell, until I finally answered through the intercom. "Willow, for God's sake, let me in. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Julian," I said, my voice even. "Your lawyer will be in touch with yours." "You ruined me," he screamed, his voice cracking with a despair that was almost pitiful. "You destroyed my career, all of it." "No, Julian," I replied softly, the final satisfying truth landing with perfect precision. "I didn't destroy your career. I just took back mine." I cut the intercom and walked away from the door. Through the window, I watched him stand on the porch for a long time before finally turning and walking away. A man with a brilliant future that was no longer his. The divorce settlement was a quiet affair, a world away from the explosive dinner party where this had all begun. Julian, stripped of his London job and his golden reputation, had no leverage. He was facing a mountain of legal fees and a career in ruins. My claim to 50% of his intellectual property was now a claim to 50% of nothing. Evelyn Reed, however, was a master negotiator. We didn't want his future, we wanted restitution for his past. He agreed to a settlement that was far from the generous one he had first offered. He signed over the house, not as a gift, but as a long overdue payment for 12 years of uncredited work. The alimony was replaced by a one-time lump sum, calculated as a percentage of the value my strategic contributions had added to his career earnings. It was, in the end, a simple severance package. He was severing ties with his secret weapon, and he had to pay for the privilege. Our friends, the ones who had witnessed my public humiliation, became my fiercest supporters. Olivia and Fiona helped me pack up the last of Julian's things. Our conversation, a mix of righteous anger on my behalf and a sad dissection of a friendship they now saw as a lie. Ben and Marcus made sure to spread the true story through the old boys network of the Boston finance world, correcting the narrative and quietly rehabilitating my reputation while cementing Julian's as a fraud. About a month after the divorce was finalized, I was having coffee with Olivia. "Have you heard about Chloe?" she asked, stirring her latte. Apparently, the moment the London job fell through, she disappeared, cleared out her desk, and was gone. She was never in love with him. She was in love with his future. The news barely registered. Chloe was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was Julian's insatiable ambition, an ambition that fed on the work of others and discarded them when they were no longer useful. I had been the first, but I was glad to know I was the last. 6 months after the divorce, my life had found a new, quieter, but far more authentic rhythm. The brownstone, once a stage for Julian's success, now felt like my own. I had converted his old home office, the one with the mahogany desk and the leather chairs, into my personal art studio. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating canvases filled with the bold, abstract paintings I had never had the time or confidence to create. I didn't need to work, but I found that I wanted to. I started my own small consulting firm, taking on only a handful of clients at a time. I worked with women-led startups, helping them craft the kind of meticulous, data-driven business strategies that had been my secret specialty for years. But this time, my name was on the door. My work was my own, and the satisfaction that came from seeing these brilliant women succeed was more profound than any secondhand pride I had ever felt from Julian's achievements. One afternoon, I received a letter with a London postmark. It was from Arthur Vance. He wrote to inform me that his firm had just implemented a new company-wide policy on intellectual property and partnership ethics. Inspired, he said, by my case. He also offered me a permanent position as a special advisor to his board, a role I could perform remotely from Boston. The world needs more brilliant minds like yours in positions of power, Mrs. Croft, he wrote, and it needs to learn how to properly credit them. I accepted the offer. The story of Julian Croft became a quiet cautionary tale in the Boston financial world. He eventually took a lower-level position at a small firm in another state, a shadow of the man that he once was. We never spoke again. The life we had built together felt like a story I had read about someone else. One crisp autumn evening, I was hosting a small dinner party in my home. Olivia, Ben, Marcus, and Fiona were there, our friendships now rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. The conversation was easy, the laughter genuine. As I looked around the table at the people who had stood by me, I realized what true partnership was. It wasn't about being a secret weapon or a supportive shadow. It was about being seen, being valued, and being celebrated for exactly who you are. Later that night, after everyone had left, I stood in my studio looking at a half-finished canvas. The colors were bold and chaotic, but a clear, strong shape was beginning to emerge from the background. For 12 years, I had been the ghostwriter of another person's story. But now finally, I was holding the brush, and the masterpiece I was creating was my own. Have you ever had your contributions overlooked or claimed by someone else, either at work or in a relationship? How did you reclaim your own narrative? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories about claiming your power and your worth. Remember that your work, your ideas, and your contributions have value, even if the people closest to you fail to see it. Thank you for listening, and may you always have the courage to sign your own name to your own life.